Hi everybody, it's John here again with another inbox plastic model kit review. Today I'm reviewing the 72nd scale Airfix Avro Vulcan B Mark II. And we're starting off here with a lovely image of XH558, which is the only surviving flying condition Vulcan still in the air on the airshow circuits. We'll just take you through the boxing history. Airfix originally released this kit under the Palatoy ownership, and in 1983, it was barely a year after the Falklands campaign was completed, and the model, like all the Palatoy boxings, is portrayed built up, sat on top of a blueprint. Supposedly the blueprint is something to do with the Vulcan, but who knows. This rendition was also accompanied by the MPC release of the Vulcan, which is MPC, of course, being Airfix's US marketing label. And this image is totally different to the Palatoy ownership boxing, because the aircraft's actually flying in flight over an island somewhere. It's interesting that this particular style of artwork was carried on in further boxings, as you'll see in a minute. But in 1983, this kit was released, and it really did surprise the market, but we'll talk about why that is in the review, and I'll start opening the box. These boxings ran through until 1990, when Heller and Humbrol owned Airfix after Palatoy went bust. This particular style of boxing was very common for Humbrol and Heller's ownership of Airfix. And they marketed the style of boxing of virtually everything that they sold. This is also interesting that this box is of XH558, the Vulcan display flight, because XH558 did actually start to fly in 1990, and it's been successfully flown in the airshow circuit. I think it was only just recently it's recently lost its certificate of airworthiness due to the fact that the aircraft charity has run out of money, and they're desperate to try and get this aircraft back in the air. It would be really nice to see her back in the air. That's the 1990 rendition of the boxing. And then in 1995, the boxing went over to a different type of style, where the aircraft was flying over Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands. You can just see in the corner of the box there, where the island is below the Vulcan, the Port Stanley runway, which of course the aircraft successfully bombed after a 12-hour flight to get to Port Stanley, and another 12-hour flight to return. So that's 1995 release. It went on to 2007, where they carried on with this theme, but in this case, they released the Vulcan under a 25-year commemoration of the Falklands War boxing, and this is a starter set, and it included all the paints, a brush to paint the aircraft, and some model adhesive to put the kit together. And I'll be honest with you, if you ever bought this kit or any of the starter sets, the first thing you should do is take all those paints and just throw them in the bin, because they're dreadful. Anyway, 2007 saw the 25th year anniversary of the Falklands War, and this box was continued into a commemoration of the Vulcan's operational history. The Vulcan was actually, it was designed in the 50s, but it entered service in 1960, and it was the last of the V-bombers to enter service. But it did carry the bulk of the operational service requirements for the nuclear deterrent against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. This particular kit again is a starter set, and it's not the only boxing of the starter set 1960 to 2010 that's on offer, because I've got the other version of the box, which this particular box shows the Vulcan in a starboard peel. Sorry, a port peel. That's better, because the aircraft's turning to the left. It's a port peel, but the boxing I've got, the aircraft is actually in a slightly larger bank. A slightly steeper bank, and the aircraft is banking at a different angle to the camera view. So that's basically the boxing history. That was released in 2010, obviously, which would have been 50 years history of the Vulcan. So we'll take the boxing pictures off, and what I want to do now is I just want to bring the camera angle round so that I can, and the only way to do that basically is to, sorry about this, but I'll just have to bring this round so that you can see the table I'm going to put the box on. Now, I do warn you, the box is huge. But basically, this is the kit. I can't even get it in focus in the camera. This is the kit that I'm actually reviewing today. And you can see from the original, the other boxing view, the aircraft is at a slightly steeper and more acute angle towards the camera angle. But it is the same. It's the same type of box. You've got a starter set with all the paints, and yeah, they're not really worth looking at. But this kit is a seriously large model. It's a seriously big kit, and I'll explain an awful lot of things you have to be aware of. But we'll get the box open so you can have a look at, see what we get inside. Yes, there's nothing else in there, isn't it? That's a seriously big box, isn't it, lads? Right. As usual, I'll start with the decals. This is a very basic decal sheet for a Vulcan bomber. I'll just show you in the view there. In the early boxings of the Vulcan, even in the 1983 rendition, the original box release, the decal sheet was about a foot, well, no, it was about 9 inches square, because it incorporated the B Mark II nuclear deterrent strategic bomber, which was white. It also incorporated the SR models and the interdictor strike variants, which were used for low level. And these were wraparound camouflage, the same as XH558 was, but it also incorporated the earlier camouflage scheme, where the Vulcan was green and grey on the top and light aircraft grey underneath. And these decals are completely missing off this particular offering. The decal sheet only applies to XH558 in her airshow performance guise, which is a shame really, because it would have been nice to have had the other decals included, because all the parts pertaining to the other variants are still in XH558's box release. The blue steel missile is here, the Bombay modification doors are here to accept the missile, and yet there isn't even a mention of them in the plans. But the decal sheet, I'll just go through the decals themselves. You've got quite a nice instrument panel there. It's nicely recreated, and it's nice, and there is a bit of a raised edge there actually. They're not as thin as I would normally expect them to be. They're obviously made by Cartograph. They just yell "I'm a Cartograph decal sheet" at you, and the decals are beautifully recreated. Even the reasonably small British Union Jack flags there, the register on them is fantastic. All of the stencils are very clearly marked. You can read them. You can read what's written on them. Really nice decal sheet, and the roundels are perfect. So the decals there, very pleased with the decals, but not so pleased as I should have been, because it would have been nice to have had all the other variants available to build as well. There's a little pamphlet in here saying XH558 needs your help now, as we are to keep her flying. Yeah, well, they need money because it's a charitable organisation, as a lot of people know. But this particular pamphlet is asking you to make a £3 donation over the phone by text, or you can join the monthly prize draw for £1,000 to be won every month. Become a Vulcan volunteer, that's people who go down and work on the aircraft free, or to join the private partnership programme for only 250 quid. So basically it's a please can you give us some money pamphlet, because we're desperate to keep this aircraft in the air. Instruction leaflet. The instruction leaflet, before I go through the actual instructions, comes with a lithograph, and it's actually beautiful looking at it. It's a beautiful recreation of what XH558 looks like. As per 2009-2010 from the Vulcan to the Sky Trust. The aircraft is of course in full wraparound camouflage, and yeah, she's a very distinctive and beautiful looking aircraft, isn't she? So that's the lithograph, giving you all the markings, stencil placements, and the colour scheme. Very clear, beautifully printed as ever from modern Airfix. Airfix's modern kits are very good in terms of telling you how to put things together. The plans themselves, I've seen larger plans on small kits, but the plans themselves are A4 sized. There is on the front lots of different languages giving you the history of the aircraft. There's more languages here giving you the history of the aircraft, and then you've got assembly instructions, which is explained in more languages, and then there's an assembly icon instruction plan. These are the icons that relate to each construction zone on the kit, which tell you whether to assemble without glue, gluing parts in place, optional parts, build this twice, weight in the nose required, and yeah, there's a serious amount of weight required in the nose of this thing. But basically, we get down to the nitty-gritty, which is the instruction sheet themselves on how to put the kit together. The instruction sheet comes in 15 steps, and the aircraft instruction sheet really does belie the fact that this kit is actually nearly 30. It's 35 years old now. So the kit is 35 years old. It was originally released in 1983, and as you can see, the actual interior detail is pretty grim, isn't it? For the interior, you basically have a floor pan, 2 seats, and a pilot. Two pilots. And you have an instrument panel with 2 joysticks, 2 steering yokes. But there is a decal, as I explained before, on the decal sheet, and the decal sheet goes quite firmly into the front of the cockpit assembly there. And then you just paint everything up. But to be honest with you, when this kit is built, you can't see a huge amount through the cockpit canopy, because the cockpit canopy, I'll show you it in a minute, is quite large, but it's extensively painted, so there's not a huge amount of clear glazing to see through into the inside of the kit. Steps 2 and 3 are the air intake assembly with the forward compressor fans there. The aircraft, of course, was powered by unreheated versions of Concorde engines, the Rolls-Royce, originally Bristol Siddeley Olympus engines. Step 4 is the fuselage assembly, which incorporates, I would say, about 40% of the wing. The air intakes go inside of the airframe here, and then you have a few bits and pieces of bulkheads and the insert cornices for the Bombay here, and then the top of the fuselage fits over the top of the cockpit detail. And then you have to add 30 grams of weight into the nose cone, but I'll be honest with you, you could probably fit 30 grams of feathers into that nose cone because it's massive. Section 5 and 6 are to do with the tail section. You've got the tail fins here which fit together, and the tail cone with the OCU and the air intake vent for the OCU at the back. Section 7 and 8 are the wing sub-assemblies, port and starboard, and then section 9 is basically assembling the entire airframe with the sub-assemblies. Section 10 and 11 are the nose and main oleo gears, the nose wheel here, and then the main oleos are doubled up. You have to build that section twice. Section 12 is the Bombay. XH558 had a standard Bombay, but the other variant, which you actually have the parts for, is the modification for the Bombay to attach the blue steel missile. Section 13 is basically the majority of the finishing off. You've got the undercarriage doors, you paint the undercarriage wheel wells. You've also got the cockpit entrance hole here, part 68, and in section 13 you have an option to have that either closed, or over here you can have it open with a strut support and an entry ladder. I've seen quite a lot of people build the Vulcan with the entry ladder option, and it looks very nice. Section 14 is finishing off the rear jet nozzle section. There are a couple of panels and bits and pieces that go at the rear end, and then section 15 is attaching all the avionics aerials, the blast shield that fits underneath the cockpit canopy, and obviously the fitting of the pitot tube and the cockpit canopy. So that's the kit's stages. They're quite easy to follow, they're quite easy to understand, and everything's very nicely arrowed and ID'd. I want to now take you through to the guts of the kit. I do stress once again, this thing is absolutely enormous. So I'll just take it off the table just to get the plastic screws out. And we'll place the plastic screws on the top here so that you can see exactly what I mean when I say this thing is enormous. The first thing I've noticed about this kit is it has nothing missing off the sprues, which is nice. We'll take you through the sprues as they come off, but before I do, actually I just wanted to take you through this. In an Airfix starter set, you've got what's called a starter set accessories pack, which comprises of usually 1 or 2 brushes, a tube of adhesive, and a load of acrylic paints. And I'll be honest with you, the brushes, they're not too bad actually. The brushes, I've used these brushes quite often. The Humboldt brushes aren't too bad. The assembly adhesive, the poly cement, that's not too bad either. If you use tubes, a lot of people don't like using tubes, they like using liquid poly. But these paints, the best thing you can do with these paints is throw them away, because they have absolutely no coverage ability, and they're terrible. They're really terrible. Terrible to get a decent finish. They're appalling. So the best thing to do with that complete set is maybe keep the adhesive if you use tubes, keep the brushes, but chuck the paint into the bin. Canopy, I'm not going to open this canopy bag because I don't want to get any scratches on this. I want to try and keep this as good as possible as I can for building this kit. Eventually I'm going to come up with a follow-up video on the build of this kit to show you how it went. But basically the canopy, you can see the canopy there. It's very frosted, but that doesn't really matter because most of this canopy is going to be painted. You have a forward windshield which comprises of 3 forward windscreens and 2 quarter lights, and then there's 2 small portholes, which they're the only parts of that canopy you're going to be able to see through, and that's why there's not a huge amount of detail inside this aeroplane, even though the aperture inside the aircraft for the cockpit is massive. There's a big massive option for experienced modelers to super detail this kit in the cockpit and then have the canopy removable. But to have the canopy removable, you're going to have a big massive seam line across the top, which isn't there on the real aircraft. So the sprues, we've got 4 light grey sprues. You can see this thing is massive. There's my hand in front of the airframe. The airframe is easily 3 times the length of the width of my hand. This sprue comprises the lower fuselage, and I'm not quite sure what they are. They're the runners that go along the back here, either side of the splitter plate. And this is the blue steel missile, and it's modified Bombay to accommodate the blue steel missile. Fits into the airframe this way out, and the missile fits inside this. The interesting thing about the blue steel missile program was that by the time they got it working right on the V Bomber Force, the missile program was very quickly scrapped in favour of the Polaris submarine missile program. And so the Vulcan, Victor and Valiant bomber nuclear deterrent became a strategic bomber version rather than a standoff missile option. On this sprue, as I said, you've got the lower fuselage, you've got the stringers, the blue steel missile, and here in the top, believe it or not, is the instrument panel. First impressions of this kit is that there's a lot of flash. Virtually every part of this kit has some sort of flash somewhere on it. Some not so bad, but some really terrible, some really serious bits of flash. These parts here, they're barely recognisable. I'll probably know what they are more or less when I clean them up and have a look at them on the plans to see where they go. The blue steel missiles don't seem to be too bad. The two halves for that aren't that bad. But the fuselage, most of the flash is probably in the worst place it could possibly be, which is in the air intakes. And I'll be honest with you, every model build review I've seen of the Airfix Vulcan, the air intakes is the biggest problem with this kit. Second sprue, we have XH458's Bombay here. You can actually have the Bombays split open to reveal the Bombays open, but of course there is no Bombay parts in the model, so I don't really understand why they've actually put a cut line through the middle of that. You'd have to super detail a Bombay on this kit, which would mean quite a lot of serious modifications. On the inside of the top half of the fuselage here, you've got the model stamp here. This is by CPG Products Corporation, which of course were originally the company that owned Palitoy. BA Avro Vulcan, B Mark II, release date 1983, it's all marked on there. There's the floor pan for the cockpit interior, tail cones. These are the splitter panel plates that go between the rear jet pipe nozzles, and there are all 16 of your main undercarriage wheels. The other two wheels are obviously on a different sprue, but there are 18 wheels to paint on this kit. 16 are on the main undercarriage oleos and 2 are on the nose wheel. And again, I'm looking at where the flash is on this kit. There's quite a bit of flash around virtually every wheel. There's a massive tree line there, which will have to be removed with quite a lot of care because it's on the side of the Bombay. And the tail cones, the only part that actually hasn't got any flash is the interior floor pan. The nose cones aren't too bad either, but they will need a little bit of cleaning up, but it's not an awful lot with them. But again, most of the problems with the flash on this kit is around here where the air intake seal is, the splitter plate, inside where the air intakes meet the inside of the air intake ducts, and the method of construction on this kit. It would have been better if they'd have built something to do with the air intake built into this part, so that you had all this in one piece, and then you fitted the rest of the air intake sort of at this end of the aircraft so that you wouldn't be able to see it so much. But all of this is going to be visible when the aircraft is built, so when you put all these parts together into here, the amount of sanding and filling you're going to have to do is probably half the work in the entire kit. The other thing I want to say also is that this model is it belies its 1983 heritage because it's covered in raised panel lines. Not all of them are nice looking, quite of them are quite seriously high. There's a recessed panel line there, I don't know what that is, but everything else is raised, which of course is not the way it would have been. It should be engraved. So if you're going to go to town on this kit, you're going to have to take all of those out and rescribe them. And there's an awful lot of it to do. A lot of modelers tend to just highlight on one side to make the raised panel lines look engraved, which is a good trick. I think the International British Modeller in America, I think he uses that method, but this kit has an awful lot of them. That's the second sprue. The third sprue gives you the main oleo undercarriage wheels, the nose wheel, a lot of the doors, and of course the tail fin and the underside of the wings. giving you the main undercarriage wheel wells here. There is absolutely no detail in the main gear oleo wells. The wheel wells are completely bereft of detail at all. It would be beneficial, certainly to me, to have a look at some photographs of the underside of the Vulcan to see what actually is going on in the wheel wells, but they are just basically flat holes with a plate at the bottom which is completely plain, and you fit all of the oleo legs to the, it looks like, to the side and to the base of the back. But again, yeah, this kit does belie its 1983 heritage, but one of the main aspects of this kit is its size. It is bloody huge. It's massive. It's so big, I'm wondering if I'm going to have the space on my worktop table to actually build it, but never mind. That's sprue 3. Again, lots of raised panel lines on the wings. I don't know if I can show you the raised panel lines on the wings here. If I can get an angle there, there, you can just see them. They are actually quite pronounced, and they're going to, I'm not sure if I'm going to sand them all out and regrave, or whether I'm just going to sand them down a little bit and try and enhance them with a bit of back shadow. I'm not sure, but yeah, I might have a look at see what some of the models have done with modelers have done with that. This sprue is Flash City. You can see the air intake parts here and how they fit together. They basically fit together, top and bottom, and then they butt up to the edge of the front end of the air intake. And these are a seriously main feature of the kit. And the method of construction that they've used to build this, I think, is really poor forward thinking, because the amount of work you're going to have to do on these parts to get them to fit together and look right is colossal. Again, virtually every part on this sprue is covered in flash. The pilots, I don't know if you remember years and years ago in the 70s, they used to do an advert for Ready Brick where the children used to leave to go to school and they were surrounded by a haze of warmth. These pilots look like they've had Ready Brick for breakfast, because they're covered in flash from head to toe. God, even their helmets, their arms, their legs, all the way down to their shoes, they're all covered in flash, and they just look like they look like they've been attacked by a sort of a gunk gun and they've been covered in ectoplasm. The nose wheel, the nose wheels themselves are covered in flash. The wings are quite clean, although there is a bit of flash on the trailing edge here which will need cleaning up, and the air intakes seem to be quite clean. Again, there's a little bit of flash on the inside edges there. Yeah, but the rest of the parts are pretty much Flash City, and those raised panel lines are quite serious. They're quite pronounced. Some of them, this one here going across the wing is quite low. This one going across and then parallel with the leading edge of the wing is quite high and pronounced. This one here is quite high and pronounced. It's like they've used a raised panel line system that doesn't even give you regimental height panel lines. Interesting. You've also got the compressor fans here, and they, again, you've got a bit of flash on two of these parts, but the rest of them are quite clean. So yeah, that's the parts. Quite a lot of flash. I've heard of other modelers ending up with kits that are covered in what we call injection molds. And when I was going through these parts, the bits you can see haven't got any injection molds, but the bits you can't, on the inside of the wings, for instance, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm guessing there's going to be 22 across just two of the wing halves, but they're all on the inside. But here, see, it's a shame it wasn't here, but on the inside of the air intake you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 injection marks plus the numbers on both sides. Well, you can see those, they'll have to be taken out completely and levelled out. So the kit is covered with issues, it's covered with problems for preparatory work you're going to have to do to finish this model. But I'm going to go through the technical gumph of the model now so that you can understand a little bit more about what this kit gives you and what it brings to your home. Because if you're interested in building a 72nd scale Vulcan, there are things you need to know before you even go into buying the kit and committing yourself to spending the money. So the technical data is the kit is an Airfix Avro Vulcan B Mark II. It's built in 1/72nd scale and it is released in Series 9. In original release date was 1983. The kit builds 16 inches long by 28 inches span, and it sits 6 inches high on its undercarriage. The model comprises 107 grey plastic parts on 4 sprues and 2 transparency parts, making 109 parts in total. The Airfix Series 9 model in 72nd scale retails for about £30 to £40, but the average price I've seen it in model shops is about £35. There are other models of the Vulcan bomber available. Cyber Hobbies, who released a Dragon release model of the B Mark II in 1/200th scale, retails for about £34. Great Wall Hobby Limited released a B Mark II in 1/144th scale, and that retails for about £32. The Frog and Revell, the Revell issue was actually the original Frog kit. This was the very first Vulcan bomber model to be released on the market, and it's of the B Mark I with the straight leading edge wings in 1/96 scale. And that kit, I'm telling you now, it's bloody awful. It's a really terrible kit, and it's not cheap because it's rare. It retails for about £50 to £150 depending on its condition. Lindbergh released 2 versions of this model, and I'm pretty sure the 1/96 scale model was actually a reboxing of the Frog kit. But they did a B Mark II in 1/100th scale for about £56, and a B Mark I in 1/96 scale, and that retails for about £27 if you can find one. Rare Plains vac form B Mark II is also available in 1/72nd, although it's now incredibly rare, but it usually retails for about £50. But the vac form Rare Plains rendition is probably the hardest to build. Overall impressions: if you want a 72nd scale Vulcan model, this is the only one on the market at present, and that's if you don't fancy a vac form jobby. It is absolutely enormous, and it's very impressive when built, but it has got serious issues. The raised panel lines that are sometimes quite high and pronounced are very apparent. It has incredibly poor fitting airframe with holes and gaps everywhere, and it has no exhaust nozzles. I've looked at this kit, there are no parts to produce the exhaust nozzles, and what a lot of modelers have done is they've sought alternative parts from either other kits or even brass pipes, small plumbing plastic pipes, to reenact the exhaust nozzles and put them in place. And when they've been put in place, they do make the rear end of the Vulcan Airfix kit an awful lot better looking. It has horrendous injection stumps everywhere, and the bad fitting air intakes, which are a main feature of this kit, are of serious concern. It is certainly not a model to be attempted if this is one of your first builds, as serious preparatory work is required to put its faults right. The new release XH558 Vulcan to the Sky doesn't feature the addition of the blue steel missile parts anywhere in its plans, but the parts are available on the sprues. And it's quite a reasonable price tag for what it is, but it will require a space of around 3 foot square in your house when it's built and finished. So that's basically the Vulcan B Mark II released from Airfix. I am looking forward to this kit with mixed feelings. I've always fancied the idea of building this model, but I've never fancied the idea of putting its issues right. But we'll see how it fits together, because every modeller and every kit has different experiences when they're building these models. But I must admit, virtually every modeller that's done a review on a build of this kit have stressed how bad its fit is in the airframe and how terrible the amount of work is required to get the air intakes right. So that's the B Mark II. Hope this video has been of use to you, and I'll catch you next time with the next review. Bye for now, lads.